Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to change the world one starfish or one person at a time. As always, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, all the things. Really excited to get to know our guest today. Lucas Root is actually in California, where I just was. So that's pretty cool. And he's actually successfully started 13 businesses, 6 of which he's currently still running, happily married. And what he's really got to focus on is community. So thanks for being on the podcast, Lucas.
Thanks for having me. One minor note, and this might be useful for your listeners as well. Starting a business doesn't mean successful.
Okay, I like that.
So I've had many businesses fail. I actually wound down one of my businesses this spring. So I went through over the course of this spring and this summer. I went through the breakup period with one of my businesses. But yeah, I still have 6. I'm still running them. And some of them are doing very well.
Good. That's awesome. So you said like your biggest thing right now is focusing on community for a lot of people. And I just think that's awesome because obviously brain health is an important thing. Community is part of that. So tell us a little bit what got you into that, where you started to see, I guess, a lack of it and where your vision is going with that.
Yeah. Thank you. I grew up in northern Vermont. My nearest neighbor was a bow shot away, a golf ball swing away. I now live in cities and have lived in cities for most of my life at this point. But where I grew up, the idea of city was weird and strange and distant. And there are things that go along with that, and I think a lot of us think that that's just sort of natural to backwoods living, is that you get to know your neighbor and you become friends with them because they're the only people around. Mm-hmm. And why wouldn't you choose to get to know them? That would be lonely. When I grew up, my parents did a couple of things really, really well. And one of the things that they did is they built a community. They had some really, really strong friendships of people that supported us and people that my family and I, supported. Not just sharing a cup of sugar, but your cows didn't get enough grass this season. The land that I grew up on is formerly a farm, so we'll hay our grass and bring it over to you. And then, sometime over the winter, maybe you'll bring us some milk or you'll come plow our driveway or something. Like, it was real community. We support each other. And I went to Wall Street. I was on Wall Street for 17 years doing mergers and acquisitions. And in the middle of one of the most dense cities in the world, one of the most densely populated areas in the world, I was lonely, which is weird. Like, why? Like, you can literally reach out one arm's length at any time, all the time, and touch a person. And I didn't reach out and touch a person. I didn't have people that were giving me hugs. I didn't have people that actually cared if I showed up. My boss did from an accounting perspective. There was work that needed to be done, but he didn't care about me. It didn't matter that it was me. It mattered that it was an able body with the skills that I had. It was this whole "you are replaceable" mindset. And I didn't notice it. That's the worst part. I didn't notice it. I didn't realize that I was lonely. I didn't realize that going out partying and drinking and eating expensive food, which is a thing you do when you're in New York City, like that's part of the experience. I didn't realize that was a drug. That I was numbing the pain. I didn't realize that until recently, within the last 2 years. My first successful business. So I started several while I was on Wall Street, trying to build my exit. My first successful business was a consulting company, which I still run. I started 7 years ago, doing business strategy for large brands. And the best known client of mine is the Pokemon Company. And I've been with them for the entire 7 years. It's been an amazing and extraordinary relationship. And when I got to the point where I was ready to leave Wall Street, my wife and I uprooted and walked away. And honestly, we haven't been back. We haven't been back to New York since we left 7 years ago. um, and it's because the experiences are exciting, but we're not missing anything.
Mm-hmm.
There are maybe two really good friends that we had there, and I'm not saying this to poke at people. I'm saying this out of a deep, vulnerable self-realization that I was lonely, and I was still lonely when we moved. And I have a great relationship with my wife. I've been with her for 15 years. I'm not lonely because of her. I'm lonely because we didn't have community. We don't have people supporting us. We don't have people that care if we show up every single day. Show up as a human, show up as a friend, show up as a community member.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the things that I've noticed in my entrepreneurial journey is that being an entrepreneur is lonely.
Mm-hmm.
It's
So what have
lonely.
you kind of done to start to shift that in the last couple of years? What are we focused on, and what are we doing what's helped you? Are you lonely now? Have you been able to work yourself out of that? Where are things now for you?
I am working myself out of that.
Good.
Here are some things that have changed. First, I realized that we culturally don't know what community is. We don't have any idea. And that's horrible. I didn't know. And
Mm-hmm.
how can you really understand that you're missing something if you don't understand what that something is?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know I was missing it. So one of the things I've done over the last couple of years, since sort of realizing that there was this lack, this gaping hole in my life, and that I needed to fill it with something other than alcohol, was I started to make really meaningful relationships. And then I started to describe I'm an engineer. I went to college for engineering and physics. I love to functionally break things down and understand them at their core components, at their parts. I started to functionally break down community and understand the core components, the parts, the elements of community, so that I could talk about it, build language inside my head. And when I build language inside my head, then I can start to build a story, because that's a thing we do. You know this probably. Your audience knows this probably. We approach the entire world, our entire life. We approach it from a story inside our head that we're telling ourselves all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna hop on this podcast and I'm gonna go do awesome, and Angela and I are gonna have an amazing conversation. That's the story that I was telling myself as I clicked connect.
Mm-hmm.
And when you change the way that you interact with an idea like community, then you can also change the story in your head, and you can change the way that you live your life. And you need to have a language. It doesn't necessarily have to be words. You could have a picture, and that's part of your language. That's part of the way we tell our story is, moving pictures, movies.
Mm-hmm.
You could have a picture, and pictures are very effective. They really do work. But again, you have to understand what you're picturing.
Mm-hmm. So what have you been working on to start to shift that? Have you started to build a community? Started to look for a community? What's been starting to take away some of the loneliness for you, Lucas?
Yeah, all of the above. Build some local, close, really high quality relationships with people that I can reach out and touch and hug and shake hands with. People who, over time and through the investment into the relationship, because that's what we do. We invest time and energy and intention into a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So over time, they start to care whether or not I show up as a human. We're not working together. I don't get money from them, so they don't care if I show up as a worker, as an entrepreneur, as a
Mm-hmm.
colleague, but as a human.
Mm-hmm.
And that matters a lot. I've also joined some communities, and I'm finding that that's filling the hole. The irony is, I now, and I didn't think of myself as an alcoholic, but I now actually only drink on business occasions. Like if I'm out for drinks with people for business, for money, then I'll drink. I don't drink at home anymore. I'm done with it.
That's awesome.
That gaping hole has been filled. That's not to say that alcohol isn't pleasurable. But I have other things that I use to bring joy into my life.
So what are some tangible tips that you would give someone? Because I know this is a mission of yours that are listening and are maybe struggling with that they're, maybe they are feeling lonely. And where would you suggest they start?
Mm. Yeah. First, go to the relationships that are going to be the easiest for you to invest in. And that's probably people you can reach out and touch, but not necessarily. Invest into the relationship you have with your mother. I know that some people probably have some troubled relationships with their parents, and look, I get it. If that's not the right approach, then find somebody else. But start with them because they're going to make it easy for you. Remind them that you care and give them an opportunity to care about you.
Mm.
And then model that relationship into other relationships, minus the mother part. Build that kind of care into other relationships that you have, relationships with people you work with, relationships that you can reach out and touch. Your neighbors, the person that you go see for your hair. Start to care about them outside of when they are giving you service.
Mm-hmm.
And make space within yourself to receive the same care.
That's good. And I know, especially in our world, like you said, the last couple of years where you kind of noticed it. And I'm guessing part of that has to do with obviously that we've gone remote and, we're able to work from anywhere, which I absolutely love. But also working from home. So you're less in an office, less around that. Was that something that really you found affected you or affected people around you? And what are some ways to handle like working from home? Because I think it's awesome that we get that opportunity. Obviously here I'm working from Mexico. But what are some ways that you found that have helped you when you are working completely remotely, that you can't like touch people or be around people, that have helped you not be so lonely?
Fun question. I think that it was just about timing. When I left Wall Street, actually, all of my businesses went completely virtual. So I've been entirely virtual for about 7 years.
Okay.
My interaction with people during COVID probably didn't change a lot. I stopped going to parties. I stopped going out to drink. So that stuff fell off, and that stuff is exciting, but it's not real connection. It's not building real community. It's not building deep relationships. You might find somebody at a party with whom you want to build a deep relationship, but you do that outside. I had a close group of very, very good friends that I'd started building just before COVID. Again, over the last sort of two plus years, I've started realizing that that gaping hole, and that close group of very good friends, we continued to interact with in person. So the COVID was timely for me to focus on this more, I think, but I think that these ideas would have started to come through me anyway. That's half of your question. The other half is some tips on how to make this awesome. So let's remember how I love to use analogies that I think people will understand. Let's remember how the office used to be. You show up to work, let's say 9 a.m., optimistically, and you get in and maybe you adjust your desk a little bit, and then you lean over your cubicle wall and say hi, good morning to your neighbor. How was your commute in? How's your daughter doing with that test? How's your wife? Did the gardener, mess up trimming the trees today? Stupid stuff, right? What we call small talk. But here's the thing. If that small talk was building a relationship, then it's not small. You can still do those exact same things. You've stopped doing them maybe because of COVID, because you're not sitting next to that person. There is no cubicle wall between you. But do them. You can't lean over the cubicle wall. So, pick up that all-powerful device that we all tell each other not to keep near you anymore. Pick up that all-powerful device, the cell phone, and call your coworker at 9 o'clock and say, hey, I miss our chats over the cubicle wall in the morning. Let's start doing them again.
Like that. Good idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So where do you see where are you headed now? What is it that excites you about your business, about your community, about where you're going, whatever it is that really, really excites you, Lucas, that gets you out of bed in the morning?
Yeah. My businesses are cool. This realization of how important community is has started to get me focused on that from a business perspective. How do I get my business to build and become involved in a community? Now, I was a strategist. I still am. One of my businesses is business strategy. We talked about this. One of the greatest strategists of all time, Peter Drucker, said, you don't, and I've known this my whole life because he said this way before I became an adult and started doing business strategy. He said, you don't attract customers. As a business, you make a customer, you build a customer, and you service that customer. And I think many people have heard that in a lot of different ways. And in fact, it's a very open statement that can be understood in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the way that I'm choosing to understand it now. Businesses that are successful because they have built a community. They are successful because they have rabid fans who absolutely love them so deeply that they won't allow that business to fail.
Mm-hmm.
They are successful because they care about the customer and because as a business, they have space within their entity to receive care from the customer. And part of that care is transactions, is money, but that's not all of it. Part of that care is giving the customer an opportunity to have a voice. Let's call that stakeholder advocacy. Part of that care is giving the customer an opportunity to use that voice to improve the service or product that they're receiving and to share that service or product with other people that customer thinks needs it. Community, it turns out, is what makes the world go round for us humans. And I've gotten very excited about finding ways to bring that into my business because I ran them all the way that probably most of us do, pay-per-click and ads and drive people in the door. And I don't care who comes because whoever comes is going to be ready to spend some money, which is great. And it's a good way to make money. And also that's not sustainable. You have to have an unlimited access to more cash to be able to just keep paying for pay-per-click. Over the last 2 years, I've wound down my advertising spend to infinitesimally small levels, surprisingly so, and my businesses are growing.
Just by focusing on community. I love that. So yeah, it's a really good tip for any business owner or anyone getting into it. Now I'm going to back up into something else. So 13 years ago, or not 13 years ago, you started 13 businesses. I don't know how many years ago. What got you into starting businesses and entrepreneurship in the first place?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. My first business, I bought a 6-bedroom house when I went to college, and instead of paying for tuition and room and board, I took loans for tuition. I didn't have to pay room and board because I bought this house, and I rented out the other 5 bedrooms to other college students who I didn't know, so it was a big risk. Welcome to business. There are risks,
Right? Yeah.
And it was a junker of a house, so I would pay people with beer and pizza. I mean, this is a real thing. Like this is something I actually did. I would pay people with beer and pizza for a half a day of work for them to come and just work on the house. And week after week after week, the house got nicer. And when I left college, I sold it and made some money. But more than that, I launched my entrepreneurial journey and just kept doing that. I just kept looking for opportunities to build businesses and succeed. The irony is that was my first business and it was a success. The next 3 were failures.
You're like, oh, this isn't easy. Oh, dang.
Yeah, this is not easy. Well, crap.
Was your parents entrepreneurs at all or not at
Nope.
all? No. Anyone in your family? Just
No, not really. And and in my immediate family, still, I'm the only significant entrepreneur.
Okay, that's interesting. So what got you through those 3 failures after? Did you do some reading? I mean, were you looking for community? I always tell people to be part of groups back then. Were you were you around people? Like what kept you? Because normally when you have a hard failure, a lot of people quit and they're just like, you know what, this isn't for me. Obviously you went to university, so you're like, I got it, I got some education. I'll go use my education, get a job and, work whatever, the 9 to 5 or that kind of thing. So what kept you going on when you were failing?
I was on Wall Street. So I had a job. I was funding these businesses, these failures out of my pocket. So, plenty of people leave Wall Street with a huge amount of savings, and I did not.
You're funding businesses. Yep.
I was funding businesses. So I left with a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge and not a huge amount of savings. From a funding perspective, it wasn't hard because Wall Street is good money. It's like the stories say.
But what kept you funding things that were failing? You said, you had 3. So I get the first one. You're like, okay, because you had a good, successful little like money making and university experience. You're like, all right, let's do this again. This sounds great. And then you failed. You're like, oh, this isn't so great. And then you did it again. You did it again. Why did you keep doing it again and again?
Yeah.
And what got you through those to keep doing it again and again?
I guess, I don't know. Good question. I never considered another possibility. The failures were just stumbling blocks and mud on my face. I didn't think that was the end of the road. It never occurred to me that it should be.
And so, one of the things, and I mean, obviously you've been probably around a lot of people getting started in business. So obviously, like listening to you, you had a lot of self-belief. And that's something that I realize people can learn and not everyone's born with. But what are some tips that you would give someone on how to build the self-belief in order to even to build a community, to go into, I know I've been to an events that I was nervous to go to. So to have the self-belief, even to go to those events where you're building that community, or if you're just getting started out in business, either way, self-belief is huge. What are some ways that like have helped you build your self-belief? And what are some ways you think could help other people build theirs?
Awesome. Start with community. I'm not just being cliche because I've been talking about it. One of the things that makes us feel safe in the world is having people that we know that will catch us if we fall. And feeling safe is central to being able to have strong self-belief. So start with community, build deep relationships start with your parents and then model that relationship to other people, build deep relationships with friends and make it so that you care about every little thing in their life because you love them, and make it so that they care about everything in your life because they love you. And then when you go and stretch yourself, for me, again, the money wasn't the issue, but I still was stretching myself emotionally, spiritually. I was putting myself out there and again, falling on my face. And having somebody that says, hey, good job, you tried. Here are the things that you learned from this. And they pick you up and they, dust you off and they push you back down on the road and you just keep going again. Having people in your life that do that is absolutely core. I had my wife, I had my parents. I didn't really have good community at the time. So you're absolutely right that self-belief was an important part of what kept me even moving forward. But having a community that can support your own self-belief is going to be, it's going to be key to being able to get through the challenges that you have, whether it's business failures or even just stoppage points where you haven't failed, but you don't know how to get through it. You need somebody to help you. You need a mentor. You need a friend. You need somebody with some outside eyes. Start with community. The second one, I talked about language and the language that we use when we're telling the story of our life in our heads as we live it. It's a thing we do. I mean, it's real. Change your language. Change the way that you're telling the story of your life in your head while you're living it. Start to use self-supportive language. I'm going to go on that podcast and I'm going to do great, as opposed to I'm going to go on that podcast and maybe it's going to suck.
We'll see how it goes.
maybe I don't want to, yeah, let's see how it goes. Maybe I don't want to go. Maybe, right? Get rid of that stuff. You can change the way that you talk to yourself, and it will actually start to make a meaningful difference in the way that your life plays out.
Mm-hmm. So good. There's a really good book. I don't know if you've read it, called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself by Shalom Helmstetter. And it's all about that. So listeners, definitely grab that book. I'm not the one that recommended it first to me, but it's a really, really good book. And speaking of that, do you do a lot of reading? Do you do a lot of obviously you're on a podcast. Do you do a lot of listening to audio and stuff like that? And how do you play that? How do you think that plays a role in your self-confidence, in winning, in the stories you tell yourself, like all of that stuff?
Yeah, I do a huge amount of reading. I probably read about a book a week, which is pretty significant considering how many other pots I have my fingers in. Yeah, so I do a lot of reading. It's a double-edged sword. Reading's amazing. A book is phenomenal. A book is a front row ticket to that author's absolute best work. It's their best work, and you have a front row ticket in that book. It's primed, it's edited, it's absolutely the absolute most top quality stuff that they can do, that author. And when you think about it from that perspective, a front row ticket to their absolute best work, their most perfect performance, reading's an amazing tool. But here's the thing. It's so easy to get lost in reading. It's so easy to get lost in what we call analysis paralysis. Should I start now or should I wait? And when you think that you're going to find the answers in books, that's when you're going to get lost in waiting, in analysis paralysis, in wondering whether or not now is the right time. And let me just say, now is the right time. Now, right now is the right time. And that's always true. It's universally true. Now is always the right time. Don't wait. If reading is a tool to change the language that you're telling your stories in, then it's a powerful tool. If you're looking for answers, then I hate to say it, but it's escapism. It's a drug. It's no different than the alcohol I was drinking.
That's good. I like it. Very, very cool. Well, I know that listeners got a lot of ideas here. Build a community, read good books, find good friends. Once again, your community thing. If you don't have good friends, find good friends. And believe in yourself. Watch the stories and the words that you're saying to yourself, because your stories dictate what actually happens in your life. So in wrapping up, I always have 3 final questions, and then anything that we didn't touch on that you just want to kind of leave for our listeners. So first final question is, someone's looking for their purpose. We hear that a lot. We want to find our purpose. What's one sentence that you would say that could help them find their purpose?
Build relationships, people that can help you fine tune the message that's coming through you, and then spend time alone. They seem like diametrically opposed, but they're not. So build relationships, so people that can help you fine tune that message, and then spend time alone and allow the message to come through you.
I like it. Number 2 question, and you might have more than one, but what comes to mind? What's one quote? What's your favorite quote and why?
My favorite quote is, "In the midst of chaos lies brilliance." And it's like saying every cloud has a silver lining, but in my language, in language that speaks to me.
I like it. Good.
I love seeing that. I love seeing the world from the brilliance that's hidden in chaos.
Yeah. Good. And number 3, what's your final word or sentence you want on your gravestone?
This man was loved.
Man was loved. Good. And all right, if you run into anyone in a coffee shop, Lucas, and they're like, "Man, I listened to your podcast. It was absolutely incredible. I'm looking for my community. I'm doing all these things." But what was something that maybe we didn't touch on that you just think is really important to leave our listeners with?
Interesting. Well, we said start now and read books and build relationships. Geez, I think that probably pretty well covers
Perfect.
it.
Start now, build relationships, read books. There you go. There's your 3 tips. I love it. As always, guys, make sure to rate, review, subscribe. Follow Lucas. We'll have all his information in the show notes, and reach out to him. I'm sure he sounds like he's really happy to help if you have any questions about anything that we discussed today. Make sure, like I said, let's go out there. Let's change one starfish or one person at a time. And together we can change the world. Thanks for being on, Lucas.
Thank you.